Angular 17 is now shipped with a new control flow syntax. This means that from Angular 17 in your Angular templates, you now have an additional way to write those common structural directives like ngIf, ngFor, ngSwitch. You now have an additional way to write these directives, which is more powerful, more readable, and we'll take a few lessons to cover that new control flow syntax. And in this lesson, we're going to talk about the replacement for ngIf, how to place a condition in Angular templates in the new if condition syntax. As usual, you have a step-by-step guide in our site for this lesson at academies.com. I'll place a link in the description. Something that's nice about the guide in the site is that you have a section at the bottom of the guide for playground. So you can actually try and play with the new syntax online in the site. So you can place a variable in the editor and try to place the new syntax. So I'm placing the new syntax for if num equals 1. So place a div with hello new syntax. So give it a try. The best way to actually learn the new syntax is code it yourself. So we saved you the hustle of opening a new Angular project. Just go online and play with the new syntax. As we mentioned, Angular 17 is now shipped with the new control flow syntax. In this lesson, we're going to cover the new syntax for ngIf, the @if syntax for conditioning your Angular templates. This new syntax is more powerful, more readable than the old syntax. The old syntax is still supported, so don't worry. You can still use the old syntax, and we'll place the new syntax and the old syntax in the same project, so you'll see the differences and how more powerful the new syntax is. So I recommend also to read the Angular GitHub request for comments about this new syntax. I'll place a link in the description. In here, they're mentioning that there might be an automation tool to help you transfer the old ngIf syntax to the new syntax. So maybe in the future we'll see some kind of tool that will help us do that transformation from the old syntax to the new syntax. Now let's try to cover it by starting a new Angular project and trying to play with the new control flow syntax for if condition. So I'll open a terminal and then I'll create a new Angular project using Angular CLI latest, and I'll call this project control flow if demo. And I'll place the flag minimal, so to keep the project with minimum file, no testing, no external templates, no external styles. At the time of this recording, we are at Angular version 17.0.7, OK to proceed. So we're in the newest Angular at the time of this recording, which Angular 17, from Angular 17, the new syntax is supported. And the styling is not that important. We're not going to use server-side rendering in this project. We'll wait for the project to be created and then open the project in VS Code. Okay, so we got the new project opened in our IDE. Let's create two components. One component that will write the old syntax in and one component to write the new syntax in. So I'll open the terminal and I'll generate using Angular CLI. I'll generate those two components. So npx ng generate component, and I'll name one component old if, and place it inline template, and I'm going to place inline styles. And I'm going to do skip tests as well. Oh, sorry, inline style, not styles. And I'll generate another component for the new if. So let's do the same command, only create it, name it new if. Okay, so created our two components. Let's see our file explorer, and we'll see here those new components. Let's open them. And let's open on the right. Let's open on the right the old if. This is the old if, and on the left is the new if syntax. So I'll place an h1 and I'll call it the old if. Let's say old if and say this is ngIf. And let's call it new if. This is our new if syntax. Okay, so great. So we have on the right the old if, on the left the new if, and let's place those components. So I'll open the app component and I'll import those two components and place them in the imports. Those are standalone components, so you need to import the components that you're using. So I'm gonna go to the new if component and import the new if component, and I'll import also the old if component, and I'll place those two components in the imports. New if, old if, and now I can place them in my site, place them in the app component, This is if new control flow syntax. So the one component selector is app oldif and app newif. App oldif. Let's place the app oldif first. Great. So now let's close this, and we will see those two components when we activate the app. So let's activate the app using ngserve. And we should see our site is running with the oldif and the newif. Great. Now it's time to actually experiment with that syntax. So I remind you, on the right we have the old ngIf syntax. On the left, the new Angular 17 control flow, the new if syntax. Okay, so let's start the comparison between the old if and the new if. So let's place for a number of 1 in our component. And in here, let's start with a simple use case of a simple ngIf. So I'll do if asterisk ngIf. We all know this old syntax. If my number is equal 1, then I will say number is 1. Now, Angular doesn't like the ngIf. Since it's a standalone component. If I place the mouse over it, I see why. Standalone components, you have to include a common module if you want to use those structural directive. So I'm going to place in the imports the common module. And now this error is gone, and I should see the number is 1 here is displayed. Great. And how does it look like in the new syntax? So let's copy this num equals 1. And in the new syntax, you'll simply place an @ sign and if, and you can say num is 1, then you start a block, a curly braces block, and then you can place the div, number is 1. So I find the left side much more readable than the right side. First of all, it really reminds you of JavaScript, right? It's inspired from Svelte and Mustache, but it actually has a very similar to JavaScript syntax. So it's really easy to see that you are in an if block. In here, it's a bit harder to see that you're actually in an if block. And if you see in the browser, number is 1 is also printed here. Now, well, the differences might be minor, and some would say that it's not that significant, but it's a bit even more readable in the else case. So let's try to do another example with an if and an else case. So if you want to do an if and else in the old syntax, it would look something like this. So I would place a condition if number equals, let's say, 2, and I will say if it's not equal to true else, then I place an else block. So I need to name that block. So let's say num not 2. I named this block with a name of your choice. Then you have to do an ng template. And you close the ng template, you name the ng template, the same name that you want the else block, and then in the ng template, you place the else block. So let's say div number is not 2. So this is how it looks like, the if else in the old if. Now in the new syntax, much more cleaner in my opinion, it looks like if num equals 2, great. This is the case where this case, the regular case, and the else case is you simply place an else. You use the else block, and then you can place number is not 2. Let's see if it completes me. Number is not 2. So this is the new syntax, which is much more understandable, the if and the else case. So we should see number is not 2 printed twice. Great, this works as well. Something else that we have here that we don't have in the old syntax is we can also do an else if. So you can also add else if condition num equals 3, for example. Let's say num is 3. So you can also place an else if. Now you can say, okay, if my number is 3, for example, I should see number 3 here. So you have another block for else if block. And this whole syntax is much cleaner, and it's more powerful since you have the else if. Now, sometimes you want to catch the implicit. So it's really useful if, let's say we have a user. And that user, let's say it has a name. And let's say that user might be logged in or logged out. So this might be either this object, or it might be null. So you can do something in the old syntax. You can do something like this. you can say, I'll do if I have a user, then I want, only if I have the user, so the user is not null, then I want to print the username. So then I can place a variable, let's say my user, let's say a different name. And I'm grabbing the implicit, I'm basically grabbing the condition here and placing it in a template variable called my user, and then I can use the my user.name and print it. So it's a good tactic if you want to grab the implicit, the condition that you're placing in the ngIf. And now I should see the username academies. Now you could do the same with if here. So let's do the user here and try to grab the implicit. I'm grabbing the user here, and now I can say if I have a user, then print username. And I can grab the implicit using the as my user. So now I can say my user.name. It's nice also if you use the async block. Usually we prefer to do all the components and change detection on push, and then use the async pipe, and then you can place it in a variable, and then that variable you don't need to place the async pipe as well. So you can also grab the implicit in the new syntax. So we see here side-by-side comparison between the old ngIf and the new if syntax. We see that the new if syntax is much more cleaner, where it's much more easier to see the blocks. It's much more easier to place an else. You don't need to define a template, and it's a bit more powerful because you also have the else if block that you can place as well. We saw a comparison between the old ngIf and the new if syntax that is shipped from Angular 17. We highly recommend, if you're using Angular 17, to use the new syntax. It's much more cleaner and readable. It's easier to distinguish the blocks, so you can actually see the if block and the else block. It's easier else syntax, so you don't have to specify those ng template for the else case, and you have the else if. We actually saw an example of one else if, but you can append more else if as much as you want, making your if much more powerful. As usual, this entire lesson is available and the source code is available in academies.com. I'll place the link in the description. I remind you that in the site you have a playground, so you can play with the new syntax. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and also star us on GitHub. Thank you for listening.